ton of games are usually about going on some kind of journey, but how do we know where we're going? What do games do to point us in the right direction? Most games don't necessarily need to do a whole lot for players to have an idea of where to go, but the way to efficiently present this can depend on how linear or open a game is. The way most games are structured falls somewhere on a spectrum of two extremes, linear and open-ended. For the purposes of this video, we'll be classifying games under three broad categories: linear, open-ended, and in between these two, semi-linear. On the linear extreme, we have games like Uncharted and Star Fox 64. These games are similar to theme park attractions, often taking players through elaborate corridors and set pieces. Traditional exploration is not really the focus of linear games. Instead, they're more about providing either a specific challenge to the player or unfolding a traditional narrative. On the open-ended extreme, we have games like Skyrim and Minecraft, which are usually large sandboxes where players are free to explore and engage with the world however they see fit with little limitation. For many of these games, exploration is the game. Now, between linear and open-ended games, we have what we'll call semi-linear games, which, as you might guess, are a mix of both worlds. The games that fall right in the middle under this category would include games like Dark Souls and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Often the goals in these games are very straightforward, but there is an emphasis on exploration. The category a game may fall under can have a major influence on how it can efficiently direct its players. For the remainder of this video, we are going to take a brief analysis of three different games that each fit into these three categories. We will discuss how each visually directs the player on where to go within the first few seconds of gameplay. And interestingly enough, all three of these games can be found on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. These include Super Mario Bros., Metroid, and The Legend of Zelda. This holy trinity of Nintendo each fit within these categories and effectively convey the respective goals the moment that the player hits start. So let's begin by taking a brief look at the original Super Mario Bros. One thing to keep in mind is that being a launch title for the original NES, Super Mario Bros. Was designed as an introduction to video games for millions of people. And the way that it almost effortlessly teaches its players through level design alone reflects this fact. You don't need a manual to understand how to play Super Mario Bros., and the first screen shows us this. Notice where the player character is faced. On the left, facing right. The composition of this screen is saying one thing to the player: go right. A thing that you'll be doing for 99% of this entire game. But what is really worth knowing is that once Mario moves towards the center of the screen, the camera begins to follow him, placing him at the center of the screen, which makes the purpose of the first screen more clear. This deceptively simple use of spacing at the start does wonders in literally directing a new player to move forward. Now with this knowledge, let's move on to our semi-linear game, 1986's Metroid. Now compared to Mario, how does Metroid start? It's a bit different, right? Unlike Mario, the player character, who is named Samus, is placed not on the left side of the screen, but at the center. Well, slightly off center, but we'll come back to that later. Anyway, being at the center, the player is now presented with two paths, left or right. Let's pretend that Mario is the only other game we've played, so we stick to what we know and move to the right. Moving to the right, we encounter some enemies, make a few jumps, shoot through some doors, until we come across a space that is too small for us to pass through. We can no longer progress this way, so logically we go back the way we came and take the path on the left, where we see a stairway and a space similar to the one that we saw earlier. Beyond the stairway, we find a small area with a flashing orb in the center. With no other options, the player naturally goes to collect the orb, which gives us a new ability to change into a ball form, which is our only way out of both here and the area that blocked us earlier. And already, Metroid has established the core of what the player does for a majority of the game. Progress through the world in a somewhat linear fashion while exploring the available areas for hidden paths and new abilities to get even further in the world. All without the player ever needing to look at the manual or read a piece of dialogue. And going back to the first moments of the game, remember how Samus was placed off-center to the left? Well, that was a subtle way to nudge players into the direction of the power-up, which would save the player a few seconds if they chose to go that way. While there is a linear progression to Metroid, it's a game that you can only progress by exploring every nook and cranny for new abilities to reach new areas, and this first area is brilliantly designed to get that idea across to the player. Now for our final example, we'll be looking at one of the first major attempts at open world game design, The Legend of Zelda. Similar to Metroid, we are placed at the center of the screen, but now we look at the game from a top-down perspective. We have also upgraded from 2 paths to a whopping 4. Left, up, right, and a black square that represents a cave. Based on the contrast of the cave entrance, the player is more likely to go here first. Inside the cave, the player is given a wooden sword which allows them to fight off enemies that they'll encounter on every other path. If the player goes off without grabbing the sword, they'll likely come back here at some point, whether they died or they feel that they can't handle the enemies out there. Now once the player has their weapon, they're free to explore a pretty large portion of the world in the pursuit of secrets, dungeons, and treasure. Now while this is somewhat similar to how Metroid was structured, there is way more emphasis on both exploration and discovery. There isn't really a straightforward path, and the opening screen reflects this nature. So now that we've gone over these 3 structures, we now know that depending on how a game is structured, whether it's linear or open-ended, should be reflected upon how the game presents itself to the player. Many of the fundamentals that these examples displayed have continued and evolved, from Mario to Crash Bandicoot to Uncharted, from Metroid to Symphony of the Night to Dark Souls, from Zelda to Shadow of the Colossus to Skyrim. The influence of level design and the sense of direction is still there and continues to evolve and change. Now, at some point in a future video, I would like to dive into the nitty-gritty of the other ways that games direct the player, but for now, think about this. Next time you're playing a game, think about how that game might be leading you on, particularly if that game is open-ended. You might be surprised by just how subtle or direct a game can be.